What happens when your divorce leads to not just healing, but a whole new purpose? How do you go from modelling and undercover corporate work to mentoring young offenders in prison and writing a best-selling book all about it? In this episode of Work This Way, we sit down with Christel Cowdrey, a multilingual mediator, former model, presenter, and author of How to Fire Your Husband in Easy Steps. We talk about betrayal, resilience, rebuilding with integrity, and why sometimes the most unexpected pivots lead to the most powerful chapters. Hey, and welcome back to Work This Way. Today we are recording in Wandsworth in our new flagship Foundry location in Wandsworth Town, SW18, London. We are joined by Christel today. Christel, introduce yourself.
So I'm Christel Cowdrey, formerly. Christel, I'm Swedish. Cowdrey. Which
Not
is,
a Swedish name?
No, very quintessentially English name.
Christel, it's a real pleasure having you here with us today in Wandsworth. It was great to meet you, and it's good to see the twins using the space. Roll us back. Give us a whistle-stop tour of your life. Take us back to Sweden.
Okay. But I'll say first, I don't call them the twins.
Okay.
Because they're IVF fraternal brothers.
Okay.
First attempt success at two at once. Found out I was infertile. Remarkable. So they're miracles. And I thought, I don't want to lump them in together because they're so individual. And they don't look alike. So they've just been the boys. And they went to a little nursery school one day and they said, oh, we're welcoming some twins. Can you put your hands up if you're a twin? And neither of them lifted their hand because they didn't. Yeah. They've been called the brothers. But anyway, I digress.
Brothers, yeah.
Yeah, they're so proud to be ambassadors of the Foundry. They really are. So it's a great privilege for me to be here. So my family were a family, my great-grandfather pioneered national cash registers, which was the first cash registers. And they used to row the fjords as a Norwegian to the hotels to give them a way of counting their money in their businesses.
He used to row the fjords.
They would row the fjords with the cash registers. And we're talking 40s, 30s, 40s. They were very progressive, my family, and they lived all over the world with NCR. The national cash registers was... My great-grandfather had a partner in Dayton, Ohio, and he took it to the Nordic countries. Wow. And then we came here for the English business, which was then in Marylebone Road. So that's how we came. And we arrived for 5 years when I was 6. And then we were in the schooling system, which was so different. So in Sweden, you start school at 7. And I was thinking about the longevity of the Scandinavians is quite high, particularly in my family. And I think because you're not at school till you're 7, you have to develop hobbies.
It's a really interesting point you make about school system starting at 7. Yeah. What was schooling like in London, I presume?
We went to Epsom, and I went to a school very near, in Epsom, and I was told not to be spoken to in Swedish for 3 months as I grasped the language. Now we know that there's a different brains focus centre for every language. And of course, if you get a language under 12, you're going to be speaking that like your natural tongue. So my embarrassment or my kind of shyness, which I didn't have because I just had to learn a language, meant that I picked up every language really fast. So I've got 6 languages.
Which 6 are they?
So Japanese was one that I picked up very quickly because we lived with some Japanese people who were also coming to England for a period. And I used to sit in on the lessons with the parents once or twice a week, and so they wouldn't lose their language. I then had dinner with them and came home and burped after every course. And my mother said, what's going on? And I said, well, that's what they do to tell the hosts that they're happy they've eaten beautiful food. And she said, I'm going to have a dinner again. No, she didn't. But I was very receptive to different culture and I love it. And that's why I'm a cross-cultural mediator now, I think. Yeah.
5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st.
So Swedish, Norwegian, they're linked, but they have different inflections. So you do have to do Portuguese. The Brazilians speak a different Portuguese. The Spanish Portuguese,
Swedish, Norwegian.
Yeah, and then French and Spanish,
right,
which I did quite high level, and then Japanese, English. Where am I now? Swedish, Norwegian. I can understand Dutch, which is weird because it's nothing to do with Swedish, but there's so much Latin. I can't do Greek, but Japanese I find really easy, and Japanese is based on the 5 vowels, so it's a, I, o, which is a, I, o, u, e.
Right.
So basically, each symbol has a sound, so it's quite easy to learn.
What came after school for you? Did you feel pressure to go to university? Was it culturally, is that the done thing?
My mother went to university in America in the 50s, so I was pretty progressive because she was a Swede. And she went to read Latin, but actually she got in touch with music and came back a professional singer instead. I was the first person to get a scholarship in my school to read multilinguistics in Aix-en-Provence University, and my mother banned me from going. I didn't understand it, but the thing was my sister didn't get one and my brother didn't get one, so why should I go? And in those days it was £1,000. The whole thing was £1,000, which in those days was also a lot of money. And they were like, it was shoved under the carpet. You're making everybody feel in. If you shine, your sister and brother don't shine. They didn't like that. That's mad from a woman who was so academic.
Yeah, so progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when I was singing, she was a real diva. She was an amazing woman. You'd have loved her. Yeah. She hasn't been long gone. But when I was singing, I was a mezzo-soprano. And one day I went to my tutor, because with singing, you go through tutors as you go up. And I always loved it. And I was singing Mio Babbino Caro by Puccini, and there's a high F. And the teacher said to me, stay there, stay there. So I was on this high F, and she started to cry. I said, why are you crying? She said, you're not a mezzo, you're a coloratura. You're like your mother. But I was then on my mother's patch. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So I think she didn't mean it against me, but I think her own lack of self-belief.
What came next?
So I was spotted and I became a model and I did lots of television commercials. And then I was all over the world, which was really fun, good money, really cool people, parties. And I think of the 20s as the years where you're showing your potential. No pressure. I said to my guys, there's no pressure. Don't worry about it. Just do whatever you want. You want to go and fly a kite. You want to go and deep sea dive. You want to go and be a marine and look at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. Whatever you want to do, behind you. Forget the money, forget the thing. Just live. And my mother actually, one of her good points was, she said to me, never let a man curtail your freedom. I've never forgotten that. And then another friend of mine's mother, and it's in my book, she said to me, to retain a man, never detain a man. Two great pieces of information that I've never, ever walked away from. So I've never looked at a man's phone or chased around or stalked or beneath me, darling.
Yeah.
And I think you have to live your life and you have to be honourable to yourself. And what she meant was, and I married at 31, and it doesn't mean your marriage lasts longer if you wait. But I had done a lot because once you're a parent, particularly of two little boys, you don't come anywhere near. You're at the bottom of the list after the dog's been fed and walked. Then maybe you have some time to yourself. I think the freedom of the 20s is really valuable, and find your space and your pace on your own. Yeah. So after university, I became a model. Then I worked for Bain. And I worked for Bain because a friend of mine who's a writer, and I written all my life, she said, I can't go in, I'm sick. Will you go in to sit in the reception? Do you mind?
At Bain?
Yeah. So I went to Fitzharding Street, and they said, Christel, we've got a company called, the Swedish company, could you help us with some translation? I said, sure. So I then rang my grandfather's brother. He was head of trade for Scandinavia, or for Sweden, certainly. So I rang him up and said, have you got the data? And the thing about the Swedes, they're data focused.
Right.
And everything exposed because they were socialists.
Okay. Yeah.
So every company is very open. You
Yeah,
can
it's
get any
transparent.
info. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get everything. So this was a dream for Bain. They were like, hang on, could she do this for us? Could she do that? And
so for listeners in the network and our wider listeners, Bain Capital.
Bain Capital is part of Bain Consulting. Yeah.
Yeah. So consultancy, essentially.
Yeah. Amazing company. And what I learned there was the respect. So if I went and researched a company, because I didn't have Bain on my forehead, so I'd go undercover to a company. And I'd always
Hang on.
Okay.
Undercover?
Oh.
Swedish?
No,
I can just picture this. This is very Bond now.
Yeah. I
love this.
Didn't
Didn't you tell me you always wanted to work at MI6?
Yeah. I'd have loved it. Because MI5, as far as I remember, collates data that's there already. But MI6 gets offensive data, is in the field. All I know is that if Bain & Company have got a client with a top product and they're looking for strategy to increase sales or whatever it is, we know that the product's great because it's international. It's an international product. So what's wrong? The people are fragile. The people are greedy. There's fraud. They're indignant. But the thing is as well, is if you sit opposite a man, you are looking at him as an opponent. That's the difference between men and women. So a woman has all her senses and they're going, tick, 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 tick. So I can deflect very quickly if you're uncomfortable. I could take you off the subject because I'm sensitive.
Christel, I love how passionate you are. You exude passion about Sweden. You've been based in the UK most of your life with travelling, things you've done, the adventures that you've been on. What parts of Swedish culture do you still hang on to?
I think I have respect for the way the culture is progressive. Spotify Swedish. You look at lots of there's no holds barred. You do it if you want to do it. If you feel it's right, try it. I love that. There's no kind of, you have to get, if you look at the world population of billionaires, nearly 60% have never been to university. They've come up and they've fought for something and they believed in something. So I think I like the fact that acting on your instincts and decisions, I like that education. I don't think that's very British. My sons were at Tunbridge School. It's very classic. One became head of sport, cricketer, professional cricketer, and the other one became head of music. And they both sang and they both played cricket. But basically, I love the fact that I was taught, put them on the water, put them in put them in front of the piano, put them where, see what they want, see what they like.
Chuck them in the pool.
Just let them see what they're good at, because it'll give them confidence, right? And so you build your confidence and you know what you can contribute comfortably, and that goes on into your adulthood.
Christel, it's great to hear your enthusiasm about your time at Bain.
Yeah.
At Foundry, we have just as many intrapreneurs as we have entrepreneur members. Give us an example, standout moment for you at Bain. You don't have to mention names, but...
The standout moment for me was I was on a diesel filter project. Really glad. And we knew that the product, as I said earlier, was top. They said they were the first biggest in the country. They weren't. They had been. They weren't. I looked into it. And then I looked a bit further into it and I found out how, I don't know, because when I first went there, I was standing in for my friend. But then they got me translating. I started a business called Christel Translations, which had all the Nordic countries, whilst I was at Bain. So I was working there. And then they started asking me...
You had a side hustle at Bain.
I had a side hustle at Bain, yeah. And then I was working for them with their clients. So it just happened on its own. It developed, which was so exciting because there was no one else at Bain doing it. They were like, really? We have people like you? And I had no confidentiality contract till about 8 years later. And anyway, so on the diesel filters, I found it very odd. And then I found out by chance that there was a company in Wales or somewhere in the British Isles that was OEMing the product, so trademarking the product of this company on a piece of metal and sending it to India. Okay, I didn't know they were sending it at the point. It was getting to India, where there were people on the streets making these filters and using the OEMing, the trade, so fraudulently. They were then, instead of using British steel, they were using Chinese steel. Right. So the whole operation was very tightly managed by 3 or 4 people. And when I went back, my bosses said to me, holy cow, what?
You're onto something.
Are you sure? This is really dangerous. So I said, I can't not be more sure. This is just me researching it. Please go through it. So that's when they sat behind me with all on the extensions. And I had another conversation with all these people.
Presumably no internet.
No internet till 96.
So you were dialing in.
You
were dialing people up on extensions.
Cold calling them. Yeah, cold calling. That's how it started. And then I'd get to chair level. I'd ask for more and I'd ask for more and I'd get to the CEO. Somehow I'd get up there.
This sounds really espionage.
Yeah.
Did you go out in the field? Were you a field agent at any point?
So what happened with this particular product was they found out it was massive fraud. So they went to the US and met the team over there and they said, we have a woman working for us who's found this out. And they said, who is she? And they said, doesn't matter. She's an employee of ours. And they said, get her off global and get her on to Turkey. We want to know about Turkey. And they said, she's not really interested in Turkey. She's done her job for us here and this is it. And that was huge. That was for me a massive moment because it was verified.
Yeah.
So I was vindicated.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have anything to do with them because it wouldn't have been particularly safe. But that was an exciting moment because what we are is intrinsically as people entitled. If we can get away with it, we try, and so on and so forth. So they were found out.
Clearly, 20s were brilliant, a lot of fun. When did you start writing? Where did that come from?
I started writing music when I was a
Right.
child, and then writing words to go with it. And then I started writing a bit of poetry, but I'm a non-fiction writer, so I don't want to really read a novel. I think life is greater than fiction, to be honest. And a lot of things, we call it faction in the business because you need a bit of both. But I write because I think it's my authentic self. So I write about people, and I write about, my first book was on visualization, for example, and there's loads of evidence on visualization, and it became a bestseller, and I was blown away. I wrote it with a very difficult German woman who wouldn't let me access sales, so I paid a lot and never made a penny back. So she can live with it. I needed to walk away from that conflict, but it was pretty upsetting because I've written every word. Then I wrote documentary concepts when I was in my 20s as well. I'm doing a documentary now, which is two series, 7 episodes each, which is a lot. So I've been researching for a year. It's very frustrating. I keep changing my mind about things. But writing to me is an essential tool. And I know that thoughts are things because I studied that. I've trained under Bob Proctor, Dr. Joe Dispenza, lots of people I've worked under to learn about personal development. And I think the freedom of personal development in some countries is greater than others. And in America, it's huge. Here, we're still getting there. Allowing people to be really who they want to be is quite something, which is brilliant with the Foundry, with your intrapreneurials.
So the first book was, like you say, you took yourself away from that.
Yeah.
You're writing TV.
So I had, my first documentary was on the Kiss, and it was the first time, it was before reality. So it was quite progressive. And Bette Midler was going to do the social kiss because she was dramatic and big in those days. And then there was the kiss of death and the this and the that. And I took it. There was a guy heading up the wine program, and he said, I want to take it to the moving picture company. And I tried to do it because I'd been to film, to Ladra. And he said, don't do it like a scholastic thing. Just speak yourself. Just be yourself. And the moving picture company signed it. And they're a great production. And I was so excited. And I said, I'll just be a co-writer. I've never done this. And then on my birthday, we signed everything. And on my birthday, it happened to be my birthday, they rang and they said, we got terrible news because I'd shown it to the BBC head of whatever it was. And it was 62 or 64 minutes. And they wanted 40 minutes or 60 minutes. And so they turned it down. But they took the synopsis, changed a couple of paragraphs, took it to the States and signed it internationally. So they stole it. And a kiss. And it went out with, in those days, we had the Radio Times and we had billboard posters, and it went out, it was for Valentine's Day, and it was meant to be, it was quite cool because nobody had done reality. Nobody's seen the stars talking about everything like that. And that was one thing that was stolen. And the other one was the head of children's TV I met, and I put a concept for charity where in the old days, Saturday television, I don't know if you're probably too young, but they used to have kids in front of a Punch and Judy, or they used to have somebody come in and everyone's kids were on the floor. And I got Frank Bruno as an example, to talk about why he fights. And the idea would be that he would get money for his charity and he'd look like Big Dog and Great Guy and talk about why he represented that charity. And he'd be teaching children about the charity, how lucky they are.
Yeah.
And then he'd have a fake sort of ring and he'd tussle with the guys, with the kid. And I put it to the head of, I shan't tell you who because he's still around, the head of that children's television. And they took it. And I had an injunction on the kiss with lawyers, but it was rubbish. It wasn't my content in the end, so we let it go. And then I had an injunction on this, but he said to me, Christel, we're an institution. You can't copyright anything. You can copyright an idea, but you didn't have any NDAs with us. You didn't have anything with us. So sorry, darling. And that went out on morning television, on Saturday television. And I said, it's not even gentlemanly behavior. That's appalling behavior. It's not honorable. And he said, let's tell you, darling.
This sounds like a difficult time on your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
In your entrepreneurial journey.
But I knew I had hit the spot.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I wouldn't have taken it.
You have got such a lovely way about you. Your passion for Sweden, your passion for writing. I know you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You've got some great entrepreneurial stories we could go on for hours talking about, because we have spoken outside of this. What advice would you give to young writers, not necessarily young writers, writers that are just getting going at the moment, I sense there's some IP protection learnings that you've had along the way.
Yeah, I have an agent now and publishers.
What advice would you give guys and girls that are starting on this journey, or whatever stage they're at?
My advice would be that we can only be our authentic selves. So no one's kidding anybody here. As a person who employs people, that someone walks in your room in 3 seconds when they want to hire them. The bottom line is our energy, our strength it comes through. And if somebody, and there might be somebody that doesn't fit at all, but there's a hunch that you have.
Potential.
A potential, yeah. And you think, okay, they're teachable, they're collaborative, they're great in a team, they've got a balanced sage mentality. I'll have them. So it's pretty basic. Our authentic selves. So if I was to say to somebody when they write, I'd say, just really follow who you are.
You've been so honest about the IP challenges that you had in your career. Now, you spoke to me about the exclamation mark. Tell me about that in the book. That was really interesting.
So it was a miraculous divorce in that my mission was accomplished because the boys have a relationship with them. I mean, he's a very lovely man. He's a very good man. He think men have affairs. I did quite a lot of research on it. They don't necessarily have affairs because their wife isn't loving enough or good enough in bed. It's about other stuff. And often it's out of sight, out of mind on a business trip, or it's an ego thing. The woman throws herself and she's beautiful at your feet. A lot of men are ready for that. And a lot of women do that to men too. So it's universal. But when you're left and you are the one not following your star, I think he said to one of the boys, I'm just going to my star. Sorry, that's a bit of a crazy thing to say. But anyway, he did. I've got to find out what this is about. I've got to find out about my life. And I think I was left with when you're left behind, you have to manage the finances, the house, the home, the children, the dogs, the life. Getting out of the shock status takes about 5 years. It's a bit like a living bereavement. Okay, it's not something that you can just walk away from. So you have to care for yourself and you have to take deep breaths and respond, not react. And I think I was good at responding, not reacting because of my brain. We seek resolution in Scandinavia, okay? After the Vikings were put back in their box, after the King Arthur burnt the cakes and they won the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Sweden became a peace-seeking,
yes,
which is why I'm a mediator. I think that's why. I want to, and I want to get...
Did the mediation role come from Bain? Or?
No, it came after I divorced.
After you divorced?
I took the training then at the university, at Regent's University.
Sorry to interject.
No.
That's a really interesting point. Because
I had to mediate everybody.
Yeah.
So the woman that my former husband, fired husband, married, had been one of my best friends and the godmother of one of my sons. Her mother was the best friend of my mother-in-law. My brother-in-law's godmother was her mother. It went on. So it was a fracture in the entire family. So I had to get off the train that was running through this family like a destruction. And I did it with dignity because if I could have gone down and slashed tires and gone violent and aggressive, I probably wouldn't have done, but it's not in my nature. And I was sitting in jail for years for murder. Wouldn't have been great. I
did what you best.
Yeah.
You wrote about it.
I wrote about it. It took me 6 years and it was in COVID. I sat with every page and it was all over the floor, a bit like my documentary I'm doing at the moment. And then I got an agent who'd asked me if I would put my head above the parapet some years earlier. And I said, no, as a Cowdrey, cricket.
Yeah.
Big family, lovely. And I love my family. And even if they're my former family, it's weird. But anyway, so I was at a course with Bob Proctor in Toronto and they said, where's your husband? Got a husband? Where's Jill? And I said, I did. But he had to be fired for his misdemeanors. And they all laughed. And so I thought that deflected the gossip, that shut them down. And I laughed and we moved on. I thought, God, Christel, and somebody said to me, that's such a good title.
That was your line. The title was born in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I had to fire my husband for his misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So it was how to fire your husband. And then I thought, somebody said blessings in disguise. I said, no, it's a miraculous divorce because we've stayed we never rowed. We had a great marriage. We had a lot of fun and we were a great team. Neither of us are driven by conflict. So we were good from that point of view. And we had these two amazing people. They're amazing. And my feeling was I was so blown away that it was someone I knew so well. And that betrayal is still there.
course.
I will never really have any respect. I can't help it. But that's fair enough. I'm not angelic. The thing is, I wrote a miraculous divorce and I said to Chris, is there anything you'd like to change? And he said, do we need an exclamation mark after a miraculous divorce? And I said, yeah, I think we do.
That was the only point.
That was his only point. And he came to the launch and the boys spoke very candidly. And I think he was blown away. And then the great John Altman, who wrote Only Look on the Bright Side of Life, the team there, he came. He's a great friend. He was my musical director and he played his sax and we all sang Only Look on the Bright Side of Life. And then Chris got up to go and he said, I've got a train to catch and I've been fired. And the room went, so it was very positive. Yeah, it was positive. But yeah, it's just about getting through crisis and restoring your life.
Your latest book, How to Fire Your Husband in Easy Steps, is out. You can buy it. You can listen to it. And like me, I read it. Tell us about the book. And more importantly, probably, who have you written this book for?
Based on being authentic, I think it was a passage for me to record. Was I consciously writing it for my sons or me or him? I'm not sure. I just knew that I had learnt so much through the crisis and that I'd never felt so vulnerable in my life, but that actually I'd come through quite a lot that I could impart and share. And what I say in the book is people have said it's very conversational. If somebody sees something in me that's an essence that they can relate to, great. Then what I've done is shared a thought that might support somebody else. I don't think anyone needs advice. I really don't. I think we're so smart. We're all grown-ups. We know what screwed us over. We don't need anyone telling us anything. Because what you need is a friend who's within what I call whistling distance. You know, you need another beating heart when you're sad. You don't need anything bordering on someone telling you what to do. So the book is not about that. The book is about me being as brave as I could be to expose as deeply and honestly as I could my authenticity through what was a treacherous journey for me. It wasn't a light-hearted journey, but it was real release. And I realized that everything I'd gone through was impacted by my childhood, by my parents. And I'm writing another book now called The Glorious Subterfuge of Mother and Fatherhood. And it's about the impact of parenting, unconscious parenting, that our parents give us from their own unconscious parenting. And then one day we arrive and we think, who am I? And like you arrive one day and you think, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. I'm an entrepreneur, or whatever it is. And that's the moment we wake up to our life and we start appreciating what we've got.
Christel, thanks for being so honest about the book and the why and the who is it for. You clearly poured a lot into it. How do you reflect on 26 years?
Okay, so I think women know how to find the father of their children. It's like an instinctive, deep gut feeling. I think I had 4 marriage proposals, she boasts. And
I'm not surprised.
said no to. But there was something about Christopher that I think I knew he'd be a good father. I knew he was very loving and a very gentle soul and very powerful and successful in his own right. He didn't need me. One of the greatest things was the freedom of the fact that he played cricket, played golf, like the rugby. So I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't want to parent a man, and I still don't want to parent a man. I wanted to meet someone on the bridge. And I think we married within a year. We were 31, so by then you know what you don't want and you know what you do need. Maybe you just know what you don't need. I don't think we should tarnish and blacken every memory. I just think that's tragic. So we had so many precious memories, and I think he's very happy that I've been dignified, and I see that was a very powerful part of my life. It's very sad. It is very sad. But equally, I think I subordinated a lot of things to be there because it wasn't the first time there was an infidelity. And I think so I don't look back with bitterness. I can get pretty frustrated that I was so close to the person he's now married to. And then her telling him that she was a sometime friend when I made her a girlfriend. It is mad. So I think the lack of respect for me, it didn't enter her head. She didn't have any. Or in that I think it's very narcissistic behavior. But I also know that we reap what we sow and that whatever we do comes back 100-fold. So if someone's on their path and they screw up and they hurt you, best thing you can do is to understand that they're transferring whatever they're transferring and that it's not about you, and that there are impactful things in their life that make them behave in a certain way that you didn't see.
Christel, someone who's done so much in your life, accomplished that, and still out there cracking on with another book, a screenplay that's bubbling away. I know that you're charitable, Alpha. We'll talk about being a mum and out there trying to find someone with his own teeth and hair. You're busy.
Yeah.
You keep yourself really busy. If you're at a networking event, how do you introduce yourself?
If somebody asked me, if they've ever asked me, I would say that I'm a writer, I'm a presenter. One of my ambitions is to do a TED Talk. I really want to do it on nurture and nature. I would say that I've realized that my passion is for the young and the elderly, and the ones in the middle have got to grow a pair and get on with life and take responsibility. So I think I have a real heart for those two areas. So the responsibility to the young, the very young and the young, and I write about it. I think the nature versus nurture, I think would be my TED Talk. So I think I would speak about that. So I started Alpha years ago in 1996 because my sister-in-law came up, having been quite acerbic towards marrying her older brother, her beloved boy. She all of a sudden came up running to me and told me she loved me one day. And I said, do you want to have a conversation about this? Shall we sit down? And she said, no, I've been to Alpha. So I thought, wow. And I'd just come through our first crisis. And I said, please, God, I need to forgive. Can you help me do it? Because I can't do it on my own. And I believe something was released in the heavens. I think forgiveness does that, but I digress. So when people go on Alpha and they're invited from anywhere to ask any silly question, why do 600 to 800 people turn up under the age of 40, 50? Some as young as 16, some as old as 70. Why are they there? They don't pay, they don't leave their number, they don't leave their email, they get fed. If they want to contribute £4, it's amazing food. And they're there for 12 weeks from 7 till 9 p.m. That's it. They don't have to reveal a thing. They can ask whatever they want, and then they go. There's a community. There's a lot of isolation in London or in every city. I learned something from these people. I feel so enriched by it. When I started going into the young offenders prison, it was perchance. I was ready. I'd always admired the woman who set up, her name's Amy Wilson. She'd set up Alpha through HTB, Holy Trinity Brompton in prisons, I think in 1991. And I was so young in it all, but I thought, and when I go there, you're not meant to hug, but I'm a disruptor. I'm the age of their mother, if not older or younger, but pretty well.
Which young offenders prison did you go to?
Felton, I go to.
Felton.
Yeah.
Out where Heathrow Airport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every Wednesday morning. And one of the things I wrote about on my Facebook, I drive through Richmond Park, and you have the stags, and it's so beautiful, and it's 7 a.m.
Yeah.
The skies are red. It's so out of this. And I think of the pleasure of that freedom. Wow, what a privilege. And then I get to Feltham, and they're incarcerated for 23 hours of the day. And if they don't get on a course because it's full, they sit there. And it's heartbreaking. Where does it start? When they tell me why they're in there. I trigger them, but I don't ask them. Apparently you're not meant to ask, but I didn't know that. Again, I break the rules. But I go because they get used to a person and they start to feel safe to speak. Everything's obviously confidential. And they're their 8 or 9 or 6 or 7. And then I go to Wormwood Scrubs, and there are men much older. They're the same age. We were talking about, at Wormwood, taking, or Scrubs as it's called, taking something to a desert island. I said I'd bring a trumpet because it would keep the animals and anything else off me, hopefully. And this man next to me was a young man. He said, I'd take a photograph of my mother. I touched his arm, and I said, but you can have 2 things. He said, that's all I need. Just wept. And they are in a difficult situation, which they have to pay for their misdemeanors or their mistakes. But they have a lot of time to reflect. So I buy them journals. I go to TK Maxx and buy journals for the boys, the young boys. And I tell them to reflect and ask God a question, or ask anyone a question, whoever they think it is, and then wait for the answer and start to believe that this is a period of reflection and they're not coming back.
Christel, to us, our conversation today, picking up on your ability to pivot, your ability to recognize an opportunity, and in the face of adversity, in a crisis, you step into another role. And you've spoken today about mediation. How did you get into becoming a professional mediator? What is mediator?
Well, it's quite a sweet story to start with, because Fabian had a company, and they rang me up and said, "We've met this lovely man. Thank you very much. And he's coming to an event of ours." So
Set up by your son.
Yeah. So I sat next to him. Anyway, we all went and had dinner. I said, "Do you want to join us all?" He was a lovely guy. And we sat down, and I said, "So tell me a little bit about your world." And he said, "I'm just learning to be a mediator." And he told me his whole story. That's what it started. And he said, "Actually, I'm gay." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "So funny. Fabian thought I'd really fancy you. And so I have to tell him that he'll be disappointed in you." And he said, "Okay." And anyway, we became friends. And after he told me his story, he said, "Can I just say that I think you'd be an amazing mediator?" He said, "I'm a barrister." And he said, "I work with disputants all the time. So consider it." So then the next day I contacted a great friend who'd been to school with Chris, who was a great friend, and he is a barrister, top dog. And he said, "Oh my goodness, you've got to do it." He said, "It's absolutely a brilliant idea. You'd be fantastic." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, go to this course with this man, but don't go to CEDA, which is a big one. They churn them out 500 a week. Do it with this man." So I did, Paul Randolph, and he sadly died at the end of my course. But so I was really lucky to have him, and I became a mediator. Now, a litigator or a solicitor, especially in litigation, deals with conflict. A mediator deals with resolution. So mediation exists to get two disputants together to meet, and then to ask them to tell you more about the story and what happened. They don't have to tell you anything, but essentially you're saying, what would make a change? What would you ask for settlement? Not financial at this, but what would make a difference to you as a person to step away from this, not go to court, not lose your house, not lose money to the lawyers, all that stuff. How can you change your life, and what would you do, and what could you say that might make a difference to the other person to find a way forward? So mediation is very much about not being weak. You can be as firm as you like, but the mediator during lockdown, they couldn't do trials. They could do hearings online, but they couldn't do trials, so they were 5 years behind. So mediation was legislated by the court, the Royal Court of Justice, to be a legal position. So a mediator now can be with 2 or 3 or 4 disputants and take that settlement all the way to a judge without an advocate of law, not needing a lawyer.
Christel, I don't know you particularly well. I've met you a few times here in Wandsworth. You exude levelness. You're calm. You're a great storyteller. The 2 boys I met, both the 2 boys now, they're lovely lads. How do you balance this constant drive with your work, your professional life? What do you do outside of that?
I like to spin, and both the boys have a side hustle. They're spin instructors.
Yeah. And
I love music. I sing. I love music. Funnily enough, one of the things my former husband said to me when we were parting, because I insisted on divorcing, he said, "I know you're not happy." And I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Because you don't sing anymore." Because I'm like, "I'm feeling good." I'm singing all the time. Yeah. And I wasn't doing that. So I think it made me think, gosh, that's something intrinsic in me that I've let go of.
And are you out singing now?
Yeah, I'm singing more.
Good.
I haven't sung professionally for a while. I've done a lot of charity things, but I haven't done it professionally for a while.
Christel, it's been an honour to chat to you today. You've been a dream. Your story is brilliant. How can our listeners, our members, help you? What services perhaps can you offer to them? Mediation, I think, is very relevant in today's world. And where can we find you? And more importantly, where can we find the book?
So the book is with every store from Waterstones right across to Foyles, whatever. And it's also on Amazon and on Audible. And at the moment, it's very low. It's 82% off on the book, reader version. And it's something like 11, 12 quid for the Audible, because Audible is now so popular. It's gone into the billions of people listening, just because we're traveling on our own, aren't we, on public transport, cars and things like that. I'd love everybody who reads it to leave a review, because I want to know if it's worth the read or how it impacts people. And I've had quite a few, which is really important, I think, so that I understand the value. If there is the value, then it's very important for me to learn how people value it. So that's what I would offer. And everybody can buy my book. I'd love them to buy it.
So we can find your book across all the usual channels.
Yeah.
How do we find you personally?
I'm here now.
Yes, you're here in Wandsworth.
I'm here in Wandsworth at the Foundry. I love it. I'm so privileged. Thank you so much.
No, it's absolute pleasure. And on LinkedIn?
And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a lot on Facebook, which everybody tells me is very dowdy and dreary. But I have big family groups on Facebook, as you can imagine, with 700 of us alive at the moment. And also the boys put me on as TikTok Mummy Advice.
Oh.
Yeah, they put me on there.
So what's your handle?
TikTok Mummy Advice.
TikTok Mummy Advice.
Yes, Mummy
LinkedIn,
Advice.
your Christel.
Christel Cowdrey.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Work This Way. It was a massive pleasure speaking with Christel. The story is a reminder that reinvention often comes from the hardest moments, and that showing up with authenticity makes all the difference. You can find How to Fire Your Husband in Easy Steps in all major bookstores, on Amazon and on Audible. See you next time.